Hey guys, this is Eric Weingartner with Weingartner Racing. Today's video is on how to CC a head. And before I start the video, I want to go ahead and tell you that Jegs was nice enough to send me a Burette kit and stuff. Now, I've already got one, but they sent me a new one with the stand. And they're not paying me to do the video, but they did go ahead and send this, so I want to be able to give them some credit and help them. I've always liked Jegs. I liked them back when Jeg Coughlin was racing and Troy Coughlin was racing Pro Stock. I really enjoyed their team, and probably the biggest reason why I started using them is because they sponsored the Engine Master Challenge way back when, and I tried to use them as much as I could during those since then. But I used them before that anyway. But anyway, I want to be upfront with you guys. I don't want to try to hide something from you. But this is the they were nice enough to send me the stuff, so I got to share some of the love. So anyway, here's the kit that it is. This is your Burette stand, 100cc, and it's in 2/10 of a cc increments. I'm gonna go and open this up and show you what the kit comes with, and I'm also gonna show you how to CC heads and some different ways that kind of help you. So let's get to opening up the box and see what's inside. By the way, the Jegs hats, I used to see those everywhere, and everybody had a Jegs hat back in the day. All right, so when you open it up, a couple things to keep in mind. The Burette is very breakable, so that's the reason why they have fragile sticker on there, and that's the reason why it's in the tube. So keep that in mind if you're getting the Burette, to be careful not to break this. Now I'm gonna go ahead and take these all apart because I don't want to be like some cheesy guy that shows the unboxing stuff. But I'll pull this all out and I'll show you what all comes in the kit. But I wanted to point out that first. Be careful with the Burette because it does break. Okay, here's what comes in the kit. I took it out of the box for you guys. It'll come with a stand. This just holds the Burette. Now this Burette on this kit is glass. That's what I mean. It's really breakable. Once it's broken, it's broken. It's not plastic, it's glass. So you just got to be kind of careful with it. So that's it. It's got a little clamp that holds it onto this, and this way, and you could turn it by way you can loosen the screw and you can turn it however you want it. You don't necessarily have to have this, by the way. It just makes things easier, but you don't have to have it. So in other words, you can actually hold it, which I've been doing for years. I would just hold the Burette in my hand while I'm letting the fluid go. And I'll show you when I'm doing it on the actual head. You don't actually have to have the stand, but it makes things easier. The other thing you have in the kit is this is an clear acrylic plate, and you're gonna end up placing this over the head itself. And I'll show you in a minute. And this is what you use to seal up the chambers or whatever you're trying to CC to block it off. And this little spot here is where you're gonna have the water comes in. By the way, it is beveled, which I don't know how good, see, there you go. So one side for sure, so you can get the idea is what you'll end up having is something like that. Not all the way in, but just where it's almost there. So be aware of that. The other side is not. You want to make sure that the flat side that's not beveled is on the head. So not this side. Anyway, that's what's in the kit. And in case you're wondering, well, how much does this cost, and it's the part numbers. This is the one that I have here. This is part number 555-80525, and it runs $106.99 at the time of filming. This is Burette and Stand. If you're like, whoa, that's a lot of money, and it is. If you're going to do more than one head, this is probably the way to go, because you won't regret getting the stand and everything. It makes it easier. But if you're like, I'm just doing it a few times, there's no sense in me spending that much money. Jegs actually has an economy kit, and it runs $20.09 at the time of this filming. And it's a CC kit, but instead of having a Burette, it's got a syringe. It'll do the same purpose. It has, the only thing is you'll probably have to keep filling up the CC syringe because the CC syringe only holds so much. So it's going to take you more time to do. But if you're just doing it, just want to see what the head's like, it's $20.09. So it's not a bad price. Really good deal. Now this one, by the way, I should point out, it only goes to 100 cc's. So there's 0 and it goes all the way down to 100. We're like, well, that's great for like small block Chevy chambers, but what about big blocks? Well, I'll show you here in a little bit too on how you do it when you've got something more than 100 cc's, and what do you do. And by the way, they do make Burettes, although Jegs doesn't sell them, that are 200 cc's. They've even got some that are 300 cc's. You'd have to look online for those. But really all you need is 100 cc, because I'll show you how to do it in a second. But essentially what you'll do is you'll fill up some other canister holding exactly 100 cc's or exactly 200 cc's if you're doing the cc intake ports. And then you'll add it to this. Yeah, anyway, it probably sounds confusing, but I'll show you in a second. So really all you need is this and some other container to hold the other fluid that you've measured out. But we'll get to that in just a minute. But anyway, that's what comes with the kits. There's your prices. Let's get started on how to actually CC correctly. Okay, we have the head set up, getting ready to CC it. I'm gonna show you what I've done just so you can kind of get an idea. I actually just use blocks of wood underneath this being a big block Chevy head, and this one's from marine application. But on a big block Chevy, even small block Chevy stuff, and some other ones as well, because the way they do their valve cover rail, it gives you, if you put just a block of wood underneath it, lets it tilt the head up a little bit and have an angle to it. And the reason for this is, what we're gonna do is, this is the plate kit that's over it. What we're gonna do is we're gonna put the valves in, and I'm gonna put just a little bit of Vaseline on the valves, not much, just to make sure they seal, because I don't have any springs on them. If you've already got a head that's assembled, you don't really have to do that anyway, because there's enough pressure that holds it. Just gravity alone will not allow it. Water can seep through, or whatever liquid we're using. So what I do is I'll put a small amount on the valve itself, set it in there, wipe off any excess on both of them. Then I'll put some, which we'll see in a second, I'll put some more Vaseline or petroleum jelly around this edge. And what we'll do is we will put this plate on. And you want to have the hole towards the top. And there's a reason why it's at an angle, because if the water comes in, we need the air to come out. So if you have it, say, the hole down here, it won't fill up because the air itself is here and it's blocked, and the water's only going to get this far. So we really want to make sure that the head's at some kind of angle so the air can escape and we get all the water in, or whatever liquid we're using. And that's what we're going to do. But let me, speaking of this as well, about what liquid to use. The best one I used to use was isopropyl alcohol or rubbing alcohol. And I used to use that all the time, but I stopped using it because during the COVID crisis that's still going on, for a while you just couldn't find it at the stores anymore. So I went back to using water. Now you might say, why use water? And why did you use that instead of rubbing alcohol or whatnot? Well, here's the reason why water is more troublesome. On every aluminum head, you'll have some kind of an alloy seat, and this one being ductile iron. Well, water can cause rusting. Now, the Vaseline itself also keeps it from rusting, but there's one of the issues. The other one is this. Water has a greater surface tension. And what I mean by that is, if I dropped one drop of water on here, you'll see it makes a little bubble. Well, the same thing, or a drop. The same thing kind of happens, and sometimes it doesn't get all the way into some of these grooves because its surface tension will not allow it to get into tighter areas as it is. In other words, it will attach itself to the plate here or to something else, and that little curve, and I mean it's very small, goes this way. So water isn't as accurate as, say, rubbing alcohol, because rubbing alcohol has a smaller surface tension, so it gets in the tighter areas. Now, how much the difference is it? We're talking like a couple tenths of a cc. So for 99% of what people are doing, it's not an issue at all. That's the reason why I switched to water. It gives you a pretty accurate results, but if you want extremely accurate, you probably should use rubbing alcohol. The other advantage of the rubbing alcohol itself is it dries faster and less likely to have rusting issues as well. So I just bring that up just to let you know. So in this case, I will use water. Now, another thing you could do, and I've done this once before, you can use water and just do one drop of, say, detergent in it, because it will break up the, like soap of some sort. It will break up the surface tension of itself with the water, and it actually gets into much tighter areas as well. The downside is you got to make sure that you're adding the water very slowly, otherwise it makes bubbles, obviously. So there is other ways. But in this case, what you're going to see me do is I'm just going to use water. It works, and it will give me very accurate results within a couple of tenths of a cc. So I'm gonna go ahead and put all the stuff together and kind of show you. Before I do that, I do want to mention, make sure that when you're doing this, you pick out the valves that you're actually using for the head. So don't just pick out some junk valves. And the reason why is this is the margin. And if there's a valve that has a thicker margin, it will take up more of the chamber volume, and your cc's will look smaller than what they actually are on a different valve. Next thing comes spark plugs. There are two different designs. There's many, many different heat ranges, but if you look at this one, this is a non-projected tip. This is projected tip. Notice how the tip's sticking out more. Make sure that you choose whichever one you're actually using. So if whatever you're using on the engine, doesn't matter so much about the heat range, although if you've got one of those extra, just use that, because the porcelain inside, the heat range also determines how deep that is in there. Point being is, find the spark plug that you're actually going to use to CC with. Don't just grab some random one. This can throw it off more than whatever liquid you can in the burette. So just something to keep in mind. So let me go ahead and put this together and we'll start CCing. Okay, now I have it all set up like you can see. So you can see that there's been a Vaseline applied, the thing's down, the clear acrylic. You've got your burette all set up, and this is filled with liquid. But I want to show you something real quick because a lot of people don't know this. Well, I shouldn't say a lot. Some people might not know this. When you're reading a burette, let's say it's like this. The water will actually bond to the sides. That's the way it works. And it makes this curve where the water is, where the water level is. And I'll try to show you if I can. There. The camera's kind of throwing it, but you can see how it's got a little curve. It's actually at 0, but it's because of the way I'm holding it. But whatever. Anyway, the curved line is what you measure. You don't measure the tops. Don't ever measure those. You measure where the dip is, like that. So in this case, it looks like you might be at 1.5 because you're looking at it that way. But actually it's at 2. That's what you read from. Now, what I've done is I've filled this up. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna fill this chamber up with it. Now, I told you there's gonna be times whenever, this burette only goes 100 cc's. There's gonna be times when you've got to cc something that's larger than 100 cc's, so what do? Well, on a small block Chevy head, let's say that, or LS head, all you do is fill it up to 100, and you'd fill this up, and wherever it stops, which typically around a small block Chevy would be like 64 or somewhere in that range, and that would be your cc's. With the big block, our chamber size are usually about 119 cc's. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna first use this burette, and you're gonna put 100 cc's in some device. Now this doesn't come in the kit, but I just filled this up with 100 cc's of liquid, exactly 100 cc's that I measured from this. So I poured 100 cc's into here. So there's 100 cc's sitting in this right now, and 100 cc's sitting over here in this. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start filling this up, and I'll let the water level come all the way down in my burette. But I'm not gonna let it come down, and never let it go below the 100. This spot, you should never, if your water levels come below this, start over. So what is gonna happen is, it's gonna come down, and probably when it gets to about 70 or so, I'm gonna stop, and I'm gonna add some of the water. Not all of it, because it, of course, will overfill it. I will add some of the water back to it, the top, sorry, and fill it back up till it's pretty well there. And then I'll finish it until the chamber's full. Then whatever water was still left in here, I will add it back to the top. And then what we'll do is we'll say, well, there's 200 cc's, and it will tell you where we'll be. And I'll show you here in a second, because once you add the rest back, it'll probably be like 119 or something, and I'll show you. The light's probably getting it bad. And it'll show you where your cc's is. In other words, you need to fill another container to hold your liquids. You don't have to use something like this. You can use whatever will hold your liquids, just as long as you pour it back in and don't spill any. The same thing would happen with the intake ports. For instance, these are 315 cc's. What you'll do is you'll fill 100 cc's more than what you'll need. So in this case, if you're doing the intake ports, you would fill 400 cc's. So I'd put in some container hold liquid, 300 and 100 in my burette. And then I keep adding, never letting it drop below the 100 until this is full, and then I'll add all the rest of that back, and that will tell me how many my cc's will be. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started, and I'll show you what I mean. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this one going. Okay, here we are kind of filling it, getting close to the end so you can kind of get an idea. There we go. Got a little bit there. That's all that there is to it. I got to move it up a little bit, but it takes 2 hands so I can get the very top of this and fill that little gap in here. But after that, fill it up and we'll look at the measurement and see where we are. All right, now that it's all full, we can actually look at the measurement and see where we are as far as the cc's. By the way, I've already done it off camera, but you'll get the idea. So what you've done is, you got to remember, there's already been 100 used because we refilled it because this chamber's more. So I put 100 in here. So I used full 100, and this would be 100 and wherever our line stops. Now I'm gonna go ahead and tell you how to kind of read these. These are going in 2 cc increments. You see this line right here in the middle? This is in between. So this would be 122, 123, because we already had 100, and that's 124. Each one of the little smaller lines is 0.2 of a cc. So we're trying to find the center of, because remember it dips down, and the camera's not doing a really good job of capturing it, but it's right at the second little mark here, which would be 2, 4. So it's 124 and 0.4. And that's all there really is to CCing. Except for I'm going to go ahead and give you a little bit of extra knowledge because I think it's important. Always CC each end of the head. So this one and this one. And because if we look, this is what the video started with me doing. It measured 124.6. This one measured 124.4. So 2/10 of a cc is not a huge deal. That's not a big deal, nothing to worry about at all. But I will say from time to time, what I have seen in my experience is the chambers will vary more than that. And the reason being is the valve job has a lot to do with it. So for instance, some valve jobs, this one might be sitting higher than that one. Now they should all be the same, but from my experience and time over time, that doesn't happen. Sometimes you have a valve job that sits down lower than the other. So if the valve job is sitting lower, the valve sits lower and there's more volume being taken up by the water. So the chamber size on this one might be much larger than that one. This one's not that bad. So, and it can vary. You'd be surprised. I've seen them vary almost 2 cc's. The other thing to look out for is always CC the other head too. Do one on each of the other heads as well. And the big reason for this is because even though you might think they'd be the same, they're not. You're like, well, I ain't got to worry about it. I've got CNC chambers. I have seen CNC chambers vary from head to head. And the reason probably has to do with something with their 0 degree when they're programming it. So there's always some 0 point where the computer says, hey, this is where you need to start from. But if the deck heights are different or something's thicker, when it actually starts cutting the chamber, one might be different than the other. Even though the shape looks the same, one's deeper than the other. I've seen that from time to time. So make sure you CC each chamber. However, the biggest reason though usually is because the valve heights aren't the same for each head or for each end of the head. I've seen that. That's probably the most common reason. Point being in this though, you need to CC the other head. Well, but then it brings in the other point. Well, what if they are 2 cc's? What do? Well, you can grind on the chamber and try getting it closer. But honestly, it's probably a bigger deal to you than it is to the engine. You're like, that can't be true. Well, this is static compression ratio. Dynamic is when the engine's actually running. So how much actual air is going in there that gets compressed. And that can vary greatly from cylinder to cylinder because of the manifold design and many other factors, rings, everything. So because of that, you can have a dynamic one, which is the running one, can be very different from what you would think it would be. If you ever doubt that, go and do a compression test on your engine, and you'll notice that the cranking compression for each cylinder is different, even if they were all the same. So 2 cc sounds like a big deal, and it's not probably ideal, but it's not the end of the world. Where it does get you in problems is if, say, you're running a class that requires a certain compression ratio and you can't go over it. If you've got one chamber, let's say this one's totally legal, and then that's the one you CC'd, but then they pull you down at the track and they CC maybe that one, and it's 2 cc smaller, well, now you're illegal on compression ratio and you get booted. So just something to think about, some stuff to know. Now, I want to thank Jegs again for letting me, giving me this burette stand and stuff to use for this. I've put the link in my description for this video. If you can, just click on that link and go to Jegs' website. I think it might actually help promote my YouTube channel. Maybe you'll get to see more cool products from Jegs, maybe something far more interesting than CC Kit. But just kind of pay it forward. They were nice enough to help me, so be nice enough to help them. And hopefully this helps you with some of this stuff. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching and take care.